You know, India's landscape, it's like this epic story written by fire, ice, and water. Today, we're going to take a grand tour, a whirlwind journey to see how it all fits together. I mean, how do you get the world's tallest mountains and tropical coral reefs in the same country? We're about to find out as we dive into the 6 major physical regions that make up this incredible subcontinent.
So to really get a grip on India, you've got to think of it as 6 completely different worlds all packed into one. Geographers have a fancy term for it, physiographic divisions. But really, it just means each zone has its own incredible story about the powerful forces that built this place.
All right, so here's the game plan for our tour. We're going to start way up high in those huge mountains, then drop down into the plains, cut across the ancient plateau, and then hit the desert, the coasts, and finally the islands. Let's go!
Okay, first stop on our journey, we're heading right to the northern border. And what do we find there? Only the most massive, most formidable mountain range on the entire planet, the mighty Himalayas.
Now, here's something that might sound a little weird. These huge, towering mountains, geologically speaking, they're brand new. They're what we call young fold mountains, which basically means they were slammed into existence by some unbelievable forces, and pretty recently in the grand scheme of Earth's history.
So how does something like that even happen? Well, just imagine 2 giant landmasses. We're talking the Indo-Australian and Eurasian tectonic plates crashing into each other in the slowest collision imaginable. That pressure had nowhere to go but up, so it crumpled the Earth's crust just like a rug you'd push against the wall. The result? This absolutely staggering 2,500-kilometer-long arc of mountains.
And you know, the Himalayas aren't just one big wall of rock. No, they're actually made up of 3 distinct ranges that run parallel to each other. What's really cool, though, is this place called the Pamir Knot. It's like this central hub where all these massive Asian mountain ranges fan out from, almost like the spokes of a giant wheel. It's pretty wild.
Okay, let's look at those 3 ranges. Furthest north and highest up, you've got the Himadri, also known as the Greater Himalayas. This is the land of permanent snow and ice, seriously high-altitude stuff. Step down a bit, and you're in the Himachal, or the Lesser Himalayas. This is where you'll find all those famous hill stations, right? Places like Shimla. And then, at the very bottom, you've got the Shivaliks. These are the foothills, and get this, they're the newest part of the range and are actually still growing today.
And just to give you a sense of scale, 8,586 meters. That's Kanchenjunga, India's highest peak. To even try to picture that, it's like stacking almost 20 Empire State Buildings on top of one another. Absolutely staggering.
All right, so you've got these gigantic mountains. What do you think happens to all the rock, silt, and soil that gets washed away from them over millions of years? Well, it all have to go somewhere, right? It flows downhill, and that's what creates our next destination, the huge northern plains. And let me tell you, they call it India's breadbasket for a very good reason.
Yeah, these plains pretty much owe their existence to the Himalayas. Think about it. For millions and millions of years, these 3 epic rivers, the Indus, the Ganga, and the Brahmaputra, have been flowing out of the mountains, carrying all this superfine silt with them. They just deposit it all here, year after year, creating one of the most incredibly fertile and most densely populated places on the entire planet. And these plains aren't just one flat, samey area. No way. There's actually a really clear pattern as you move away from the mountains. So right at the foothills, the rivers dump all their big, heavy pebbles. The zone's called the Babar, and it's so porous that the rivers just disappear underground. But wait, a little farther south, all that water pops back up to the surface, and that creates a really marshy, swampy area called the Tarai. And then you finally get to the good stuff, the real heart of the farmland. First the older soil, called Bangar, and then the brand new, unbelievably fertile stuff called Kadar, which gets a fresh top-up from floods every single year.
Here's a cool word you need to know for this area. Doab. It's pretty simple when you break it down. Do means 2 and ab means water. So a doab is just that strip of land you find between 2 rivers. And it makes total sense for the Punjab region, which literally means land of 5 waters, because it's made up of, you guessed it, 5 of these doab. Okay, so we've covered the brand new mountains and the super fertile plains they've built, but what happens when we keep heading south? What's next?
And here we are, the Peninsular Plateau. And this place could not be more different from the Himalayas. Remember how they were the young mountains? Well, this plateau is the complete opposite. It's the oldest, most stable chunk of land on the whole subcontinent. Basically a huge tableland made of ancient rock.
Now, on either side of this plateau, you've got these 2 mountain ranges called the Ghats. The Western Ghats, think of them like a big, continuous wall. They're super steep and they're what catches all that monsoon rain. The Eastern Ghats, on the other hand, are totally different. They're lower, they're broken up into separate hills. Basically, they've been worn down over millions of years by powerful rivers carving their way to the ocean.
One of the most famous parts of this whole region is the Deccan Plateau. And it's famous for one thing in particular. It's black soil. And this isn't just any dirt. It's actually volcanic rock that's broken down over time. That makes it super fertile and absolutely perfect for growing things like cotton. It's literally a landscape that was born from fire.
All right, time to shift gears. We're heading west now, right to the edge of the Aravalli Hills and into our fourth region, the Great Indian Desert, better known as the Thar Desert.
Okay, get this number in your head. Less than 150 millimeters. That's how much rain this place gets in an entire year. That's almost nothing. And that extreme lack of water is what defines everything about the dry, sandy landscape of the Thar.
So what does that actually look like? Well, it means you've got a huge, sandy plain and not much growing on it. The only streams you'll see pop up for a little while during the rainy season, and then, poof, they're gone. In fact, the Luni is the only real river in the whole area, and half the time it dries up before it can even make it to the sea. It's a really tough environment, but it has a beauty all its own.
Okay, from the bone-dry desert, let's head to the coast. We're going to check out those thin strips of flat land that sandwich the big plateau in the middle. This is where India finally meets the ocean. And just like with the Ghats, we have a tale of two very different coasts. On the west, remember how steep and tall the Western Ghats are? Well, because of that, the coastal plain is really narrow, squeezed between the mountains and the sea. But the eastern coast? Totally different story. It's way, way wider. And that's because all those big rivers we talked about have had plenty of room to dump tons and tons of sediment, building up these massive, super fertile deltas.
All right, it's time for the final leg of our tour. We're leaving the mainland behind and heading out to sea to explore India's two major groups of islands. They're really like these incredible jewels just floating out there in the ocean. And you won't believe how different their origins are. Over in the Arabian Sea, you have the Lakshadweep Islands. These were actually built by living creatures, tiny little coral polyps, building up reefs over thousands of years. But then you go to the Bay of Bengal and you see the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. These aren't biological at all. They're geological. They are literally the tips of a giant underwater mountain range poking out of the sea. How amazing is that? So there you have it, 6 incredibly different landscapes, all packed into one country. We've seen how continental collisions pushed up the world's highest peaks, how mighty rivers created vast fertile plains, and how ancient volcanoes and even tiny coral animals played their part. It's pretty clear the map of India isn't just a drawing. It's a living, breathing story of creation. From those soaring peaks all the way down to the coral islands, what part of this grand tour surprised you the most?